The title of this video is quite interesting one as well. I know I say that a lot, but here's what I'll give you an example, right? Sometimes you read the title of the video and you can actually already know or what is the video all about. But the video I'm about to watch, the title of it is like South Africa's new racist money scheme. Since when money is racist now? Money can be racist? Obviously I'm kidding, but it really caught my attention. Great thing that it's not a long video, so let's find out why.
Announced that it intends to start a 100 billion rand fund that it intends to source from the private sector, but surprise, surprise, it would be a race-based fund aimed at, as they say, empowering black businesses by giving them money that would be sourced from the private sector. Now, on this channel and on this podcast that is also published on this channel, a recurring theme has been the topic of reality. And we might even go as far as to say that the great friction or the great conflict of our time is between those who wish to preserve life as we know it in harmony with or in recognition with reality, as opposed to those who are driven by some ideological pursuit that is detached from reality, that are trying to force reality to comply with their ideological prescriptions. And so we touched on this, for example, in my recent conversation with DC Schindler from a slightly more philosophical perspective. We touched on this recently in our discussion on the real reasons why the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is...
You know, the BEE, things like this. I'm going to give you an example with the BEE, with the DEI, you know, diversity, employment acts like that, you know. I think I approach most topics, let me say political topics, I think I approach them very logically, right? Most of them I would think that I approach them very logically, you know. I try to hear both sides of the story and I come to a conclusion that sounds the most logical and the most realistic to implement. Because sometimes a logical solution, what I've noticed also in politics, sometimes the logical solution is not also the most realistic one to implement. I wish I can come up with an example right now. For an example, to stop abortion, right? To stop abortion, the most logical example, it will be to ban abortion. But is it the realistic one for the best outcome? Probably not. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I wish I can get into depth of why I said that, but I don't want to make this thing long. When it comes to things like this, you know, like things like this, BEE, DEI, where they sort of they have schemes that only help black people, or they only help a certain group of people. Like this, most of the time it's black people. When they force, like right now Starlink is not available in South Africa because 30% of their staff is not black people. It doesn't comply with the South African BEE or like something like that with the government, what the government requires them to, right? Now I think I approach this one a little bit emotional, right? I would say in my logical explanation, I'll be like, things like DEI and what you call, like forcing like Starlink to hire 30% of people, I would, in my logical explanation, I would say that's stupid. Or okay, maybe not stupid, I don't think, I would say that's just gonna create, it's not the best option, because it's stopping us from receiving fast internet, and the other countries in the world are outpacing us and stuff like that, you know. But when it comes to the BE and the DI one, I approach it very emotionally. I feel like white people have had so much advantage in the past. They were not playing fair. They did not get to the position that they have today by playing fair. They were playing unfair. So when they complain about BEE and DI being unfair, I'm like, no, that's actually the fair part. Does it make a logical, is it logically the best solution for the future? You can debate about it. We can debate the logical outcomes for the future. You can debate about that. But I also think these things are required, because your grandfather, for him to own, let's say for an example, I don't know, I'm gonna make a crazy statistics. Let's say it happens that 90% of land in South Africa is owned by white people, right? How did they get that land? They didn't buy it. Obviously, most of them they didn't buy it. They got it through apartheid era, apartheid government. And now that apartheid is over, it's like, oh, okay, sharp, everything is done. Okay, sharp. Let's say it's like they got a head start. Now you must start running from the back. You're trying to catch up, and they're already there. So what BEE and DI is doing is like, no, we're also gonna take some of the people from back here. We're gonna put them close to you so they can start running from there. And I would also argue, even by doing that, you still, they still, they still, they're still not able to perform as much as some of those white people are already far ahead as they are. We're not as efficient as they are. Let's say you're white. This, oh my god, I'm going into details about this. I wish I can have, one of the stuff I wish I can have, not, I wouldn't say debate, but I don't want to say a debate, but like a very educated conversation with like people who are interested in this stuff.
Is resigning, and this new development in South Africa is another perfect example of the war that is being waged on reality. Firstly, the term black empowerment is a semantic fraud. It is a term that claims to convey a meaning that is exactly the opposite to what the project that carries this name is trying to achieve.
Okay, elaborate.
Black economic empowerment, as we know it in South Africa, and the affirmative action policies that accompany these projects or these initiatives have nothing to do with empowering black people and everything to do with making black people dependent on the South African government.
Let's go back to the example that I made. Also, white people were dependent on the apartheid government. You can even take it even back than that. They were dependent on colonialism or whatever, when they came to Africa and killed people and turned them into slaves, and they owned their land and took their crops and stuff like that. That's how they got the thing. Most white people today, they complain about BEE and affirmative action not being fair because it incentivizes, it sort of like gives black people like a, like a head start. I'm like, it's not even a head start. We are trying to play at the same level as you. Your grandfather and whatever, they put you at this head start. So let me give you an example. If there's a white doctor and I'm a black doctor, right? And I got there, that white doctor got there to that level of work because they were able to study for 7 years and they qualified and whatever, and their parents took them to school to get there, right? I got to be a doctor because of affirmative action, right? I got there because of affirmative action and other stuff, BEE and whatever, right? I got there, right? We are still not as efficient or the same playing level field because you come from a good background. Me as a doctor, I'm trying to help my siblings, that uncle, whatever, who are all affected by poverty. You know what I'm saying? So even as much as they complain about it's giving us a head start, I'm saying it's trying to put us at the same playing level and field. Now some white people might say, well, it's not fair for us to sort of like pay for our ancestors' faults and stuff like that. I'm like, most of you guys are still benefiting from it.
And it should not be controversial to say that dependency is the opposite of empowerment. Since the ANC took power in 1994, its policies has repeatedly failed, and the evidence is there for everyone to see.
They say the ANC, since 1994, their policies have failed up until today. I call that completely a biased comment. It can be a very biased statement. Am I saying, I'm gonna do a very simple logical question, which I'm gonna ask the audience that are watching this, right? Do you think black people in 1994 were living a better life than black people in 2024, in 2025 actually? So if you're gonna say the ANC, whatever, I don't even see it as the ANC. It's not because of a specific, I'm just gonna say the ANC is fine. Are you saying black people in 1994, before the policies, before 1994, they were living a better life than in 2025? Because if that is not true, because I can guarantee you there's many stats besides single motherhood, of course. I'm sure that one is a decline. But I would say there are more black people that are more educated today, who are working better jobs than today, who are earning better. Is it all of us? No, it's not. It's not all of us. But I would argue that there are more opportunities for black people than in 1994. So that statement, it can be very debunked. It needs to be talked about. And in what specific area is he referring to when he's saying the ANC policies do not help or whatever?
The unemployment rate in South Africa has increased from 20% when they took power up till 33%.
Well, it took, okay, the unemployment went from 20% to 33%. All right, let's see. I'm gonna check what is the unemployment rate, because the ANC has been in power for more than 25 years or 20 years. Okay, sharp. I'm going to Google what was the unemployment rate in South Africa during apartheid, because there isn't much details. Okay, the unemployment rate in South Africa during the apartheid was high. There's no specific data because surely it wasn't collected, but I can assure you, although it might be, we can argue about saying, well, it could be better, and don't if someone else was in power, the unemployment could be better. But for the fact that he's blaming the ANC, clearly he must be comparing it to something else. You can't compare the ANC to, the only thing you can compare the ANC performance, it's the apartheid government, and which black people were just doing worse in, I would say, in 90% of metrics
in last year. And this is only counting the narrow definition of unemployment. In other words, not counting
he says the ANC, because it's the ANC. It can be true, but who was also back in power in 2010? It was still the ANC.
those who are not working and who are not looking for work as unemployed. But it's not only the general unemployment statistics that have increased since the ANC took power, especially.
You see, he's totally incorrect, bro. He's saying this because there's no data for the apartheid, but I can assure you, I'll make a huge argument. I would bet my bank account on it. There were more unemployed people back in apartheid than today in 2024. Although even today it's high, but I would make a huge argument there were more people unemployed. Let's see.
Black unemployment has increased in South Africa.
From what age? Okay, you see, when I see that's like this, bro. Oh my god, bro. Look at this data, bro. This data is from back in 2019. Who was in power before 2019? Was it, what was it? Was it apartheid? What? No, it was not. It was still the ANC. The only thing you can compare the ANC to is the apartheid, because there was no one else in power. So it makes this graph, whatever he's presenting right now, irrelevant.
When the ANC took power in 1994, black unemployment in this country stood at 22%.
I disagree with that. He says black employment rate in 1994, before then it was 20%. I want him to present, because let me ask DeepSync, because I argue that is correct. I argue, but also we have to see the quality of like what types of job people were doing, how much were they earning. If everyone is employed but they are also earning like pennies, let's say like 96% of them or 99% of them, they are not even allowed to get certain jobs. Do you also consider that is that a fair data comparison? No. Why? The reason why I say that, let's say, for example, let's say back in 1994, if it was true, which I know is completely wrong. I'm not saying I know, but I will bet my bank account is completely wrong. If the unemployment rate amongst black people in 1994 was 20% and today it's 30%, right? I would argue that the quality of jobs that black people are doing now and how much they're earning is sufficiently more. They have sufficiently more purchasing power. I think that's the right term. What I mean by that, let's say it's 20% unemployment rate, but the whole 80% only makes, obviously this is just an example, right? Let's say the whole 80% of people who were employed in back in 1994 make around $1 million, right? All of them collected. But in 2025, all of them all collected make around $500 million, right? Even though there's a 30% unemployment rate, those people who are unemployed and more and have more purchasing power, even if you compare it to the dollar by that time and now, they have more, let's say they probably have more 20x or 30x purchasing power than the people who are unemployed in 1994 as the data he claims. But for that, I don't even mind pausing the video. I don't like to pause the video usually most of the time when I start googling stuff like this, but I think I should, because I want to see what was the unemployment rate. What was the employment rate in South Africa in 1993 actually. What was the unemployment rate in South Africa in 1993? Because the ANC came in power in 1994. Let's see. Okay, that's actually showed. It says it's around 20%. It is estimated around 17 to 18%. Okay. What was the page? What was the difference? What was the, oh my god, I don't know how to phrase this question. I wanted to ask, what was the purchasing power of black people in 1994 compared to black people in 2025? Yeah, I'm gonna ask it like that. Where is the stupid tab? What was the purchasing power of black people in South Africa? Did I also type South Africa? Okay, South Africa. In South Africa in 1993 versus 2024, right? What was the purchasing power of black people in 1993 versus 2024? I don't know if this is the right way to type this question, but yeah, I think I'll be so surprised, bro. And also I'll check the inflation. I think it's frozen. Is it frozen? Okay, I'm gonna come back to this as it's still loading, because I don't know why it's loading so bad. I'm just gonna finish this one.
It has risen sustainably and consistently up to the point of 37% in 2024. But that's not all. When we look at unemployment in South Africa, there's a very clear discrepancy between older generations and younger generations. Within South Africa, youth unemployment is at a staggering 60%. 60% youth unemployment in South Africa.
Bro, I'm still waiting for this. Look at this. This is still loading. Okay, now, okay, now it's loading. Okay, it was frozen for a while there.
Obviously, this is the consequence of the policies that have been implemented over the last 30 years. If you've been in power for 30 years, you cannot blame the previous government for the failures that are evident in society today. Yet, the ANC in South Africa and their allies and those in power in South Africa would really like us to believe that the solution to these failures is that we should keep implementing the policies that have led to these failures, but only more aggressively. Once again, as if a more aggressive implementation of a failed policy would not lead to a more aggressive failure. But an interesting phenomenon has developed in South Africa over the last few years, which is that the South African government and those in power have lost their power to truly govern or micromanage society as they would like to do. And so, to a large extent, the question as to whether policies such as these would succeed depends not on whether they are implemented by the government, but depends on whether the private sector plays along, whether the private sector makes these policies a reality. And in as far as we have civil disobedience in South Africa, as we have seen, for example, with the e-toll system, COVID lockdown regulations, and so forth, these policies are not implemented. In as far as the private sector, private companies implement these policies, they become a reality. This is why Dirk Herman of Solidarity has called on the private sector to take a stance. The South African government is suffocating the private sector through race-based policies, through overregulation and everything that accompanies this. They want to keep implementing such policies, and they are trying to be increasingly radical in the policies that they are trying to implement. Whether we're talking about this 100 billion rand fund that aims to give preferential to people on a race basis, whether we're talking about expropriation of private property without compensation, national health insurance, and so forth. The efficacy or the sustainability of these policies depend on the extent to which people comply.
Yes, one thing I want to say as to the thing, the AI model is still loading up, right? I know this thing, he said something about the BEE and the affirmative action. They've been implemented, but it has not made a change in the unemployment or whatever the way suggesting. Yes, it's not been effective. But one thing I can tell you is that I was reading an article this week. I don't know how accurate it is, but I was reading an article this week about Starlink, because it was being forced of like to have 30% of black people in their company so that they can be able to operate in South Africa, right? South Africa, Starlink find out and show that most companies that are in South Africa are not even enforced. That law is not enforced. So the government is rethinking of forcing Starlink to operate in South Africa without them following that policy, because they realize that most of the companies in South Africa, the private sector, most of them are not even enforced. So they are not even punished if they are not doing it. They can just say they are doing it, or they can say we are about to do it, but there is no like a consequence of them not doing it. That's what I found. I don't know how accurate is it, but that's what I found out. It's still loading here. I'm finished this video.
And so it is high time in South Africa that the private sector takes a much stronger stance against the implementation of such policies. Civil disobedience is a controversial thing, but sometimes we find that it's the only moral thing to do.
I'm aware that the problem.
Wow, this AI, I mean, good thing DeepSync is free, but holy shit, this AI model is so slow. Okay, I think this is a very credit information. That's what I'm showing here. This AI model is great, but it's slow. It's great, but it's slow. It's so good at explaining. So look at this here. The only thing we care about, the unemployment rate in 2024, it is higher than 1993, right? Okay, no. Actually, the unemployment in 1993 was 40%. So the information that he gave us was completely incorrect. I would even play the sake of saying, let's say the unemployment rate is still the same, right? We have to factor in things like this. An average income in 1993 was 15,000 for a black household for a year. Now it's 120. Now inflation plays a part. Let's now look at access to service. Improved, but quality varies. So here it's limited. Now it is improved. That's like the bottom line thing we care about. Here we can even argue that the unemployment rate was even higher. As I said in the beginning, the stats that he gave us, I was like very skeptical of him saying that unemployment rate amongst black people in 1993 was like 20, and now it's no. I would argue it was even worse than that. I would even make an argument for like 50% or to 60. You can't imagine this. Let's use logical sense to address this. His claims of seeing of him saying in 1993 only 20% of black people were unemployed. Let's use logical sense. Most black people are limited to education. They are not allowed to be in certain areas. They are not allowed to receive certain education. They are not allowed in certain areas. So you're telling me those people, even though they are limited in education, how are they going to be able, how are they able to have more employment rate than in 2025, where they are allowed to have education and to go wherever they want to go? How? That didn't make sense. That didn't make sense at all. But I wish I can get in this topic a much longer, but let me just read the last part. While income rose nominally, real purchasing power is muted by inflation and unemployment rate. Example, 1993, 100 rand could buy you 20 liters of milk. Today, it buys you 5 liters. Ooh, that's an interesting one. Top 10, including a grow black elite, hold 85% of wealth, masking again a stagnation for majority. That top 10 was probably not in top 10 in 1993. BEE and social ground has improved lives for millions, but systemic barriers, education gaps, corruption limited the border. No one is debating that. We can all agree that corruption is the big problem in South Africa. In conclusion, black South Africans' purchasing power has improved nominally since 1993 due to political empowerment and economic forums. So whatever statements that he was making in those claims that ANC hasn't done or the government has improved the lives of black people since 1994 is completely incorrect, right? But real gains are uneven. It is very hard to compare, especially when we have a limited data from before then, right? I totally agree with that. While a majority has joined the middle class, most face persistent poverty due to structural unemployment rate, inflation, inequality. The 2024 economics offers more opportunity but remains constrained by the legacy issues and global pressures. We can all agree with that. That was not the debate. We can all agree on this one. Right? WV. It's interesting how a short video can end up being such a long video. I saw a short video, I was like, let me just quickly dive into it and see what happened. But yeah, it's very interesting stuff to talk about.